Yeah,
So,
it's interesting to see how far the website has progressed in
mm,
terms of having a presence.
exactly, exactly.
I never expected it to get this far, honestly, but
Me neither.
or let me rephrase, I never expected to get this far this fast.
Yeah, I mean, how long has it been? It's been just over a year.
Yeah, about that.
That's it, you know?
And I seem this always seems to be the case as my predictions is like I assume things function in like a linear manner, like, it just seems human nature functions in a very I suppose exponential way, I think is the way of putting it. Like, I was a bit surprised how there was like no real right of any significant size, like 10 years ago, but now I'm just shocked how explosive all this growth is we're getting in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, it's geometric. It's quite amazing. I mean, even with like what happened with the alt-right and how Hillary Clinton has used the term in a speech, and all of a sudden, all this interest. These things, they do come down to the kind of spontaneity of human character and kind of daily politics, and
Well, I think it also reminds us that the system is not invincible. They're
yeah,
humans
yeah,
like
exactly.
anyone else. And I think if they keep this up, I mean, I keep talking to all my Catholic buddies like Argent Templar and, a couple other guys like Monarchist Autist or, Iberian Socrates. Well, not Socrates anymore, just Iberian. And, they say pride is the worst sin in Catholicism, right?
Yeah.
And if you told me that maybe a little bit earlier in life, I would have thought, that that's stupid. It's just more Christians want to be meanies, preventing people from having fun in life or whatever. But the more I see the behavior, especially of liberals, the more I think that's a spot-on assessment because I think it will be their pride that
Yeah.
will destroy them. Because
It's
these
that.
people literally seem to assume all their opponents are just toothless hillbillies they can easily, knock out of the park.
Yeah, it's arrogance. It's an arrogance and un, an underestimation of what's before you and your apparent challenges. That's the biggest trouble, really, that they face. And of course, I think that's something we all face. You know, not understanding how complex issues can be, or
Well,
underestimating
yeah, obviously
ourselves,
we
or
all are guilty of various, I suppose, sins or negative things to some extent. But to me, it just seems it's such an like extreme case in the liberals. You know,
yeah, 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 because they
like they
are.
literally cannot fathom that there's intelligent opposition to them a lot of the time.
Well, no, because they have never been exposed to it. I mean, good grief! Just today, I had someone commenting on a video on my channel. I think it was my "What is the alt-right" video, where I kind of laid out my position on things, and this moron said something along the lines of, "This is just fascism, pure fascism," and I, just using these buzzwords. And I said, "No, that's not true." And yada
Well, I
yada
think it
yada.
honestly kind of disproves your point because obviously, you're an intelligent person, for instance. You probably heard at least a little bit of that podcast, but again, it's like even though you are speaking about these issues intelligently, you know,
But after a small bit of conversation, his whole position hadn't changed. To him, I was just some loony retard. Even though I had told him really nothing extreme or whatever about the question. He just assumed because he couldn't grasp it, it was deemed basically unintelligible. And this is basically the foremost sin of I think a lot of ordinary people is if they see something which they cannot or do not understand or feel is superior or above them, they don't try to interact with it or assimilate it. They don't try to humble themselves before it, but they cast it aside and they act bitterly.
especially liberals who have gotten used to feeling so smart compared to,
Exactly.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So when they actually come across someone who's very intelligent, who's on the far right or a fascist or whatever, then they have no idea what to do because that's an anomaly to them, and they'll just say it doesn't matter what someone on the far right will say. It doesn't matter because they're a far righter, and that means they're immediately stupid, even if they're very intelligent, went to university, yada yada yada. Um, but that's again, it's pride, it's arrogance, it's
It will destroy them because, as annoying as it seemed now, I actually got a chance to ponder this question recently. And, I mean, it's definitely annoying that, one, they can't conceive their opposition is intelligent, and two, that they just dogpile on anyone they don't like using their superior numbers in like the urban elite environment. That being said, that might actually be used to our advantage because it seems very few of them can actually really understand the gravity of the situation.
No, they don't understand that, like in England, for example, they don't understand that this society is a fragile, complex system.
I
And
guess I meant more specifically the right. Like they don't know the beast they're dealing with anymore. Like a lot of these liberals are still like I would say there's 2 years liberals are obsessed with 1968 and 2008. Like they're still stuck in this mindset like, oh, conservatives are just dumb people who support the Iraq war and drive pickup trucks, like
yeah, yeah,
their
yeah,
imagination hasn't progressed beyond that, but we obviously, all of us have, come from all kinds of different ideological schools and formed into this little sphere. And I think I've only seen like one or two, lefties. One of them was on an anarchist subreddit who correctly assessed, these people are actually serious, they're intelligent, and they're a big threat to the liberal order. But people like that seem to be more the exception than the rule because everyone else is just, oh, these people are stupid hillbillies and they probably vote Republican, yada yada yada. Insert bullshit virtue signaling talking point here, etc., etc.
yeah, yeah. Um, but I am glad to see, for example, with this whole alt-right debacle, plenty of people are coming out and now trying to define what the alt-right is. Even people who are kind of on the fringe. I don't know if you saw Rick Rubin, his kind of shot at it. I thought it was much better than it could than I expected. Um, and that video has over 100,000 views. So does Paul Joseph Watson's video, even though Paul Joseph Watson is a liberal. Um, it's interesting you're seeing this now, this explosion of energy, and I
Yeah.
believe a lot of people are kind of because it is the young who are the future, right? And if a significant portion of the young who are intelligent, largely well educated, etc., are involved or enamored or aware of this kind of alt-right nexus, this kind of phenomenon, this kind of network, then they're the people who are going to go into the governments in a few years and into legislation and into education, all these other things. So these things do have a broader impact, and especially via the internet and how these sorts of ideologies are spreading through memes and jokes and a good laugh. It's infectious. The alt-right ideology acts like a virus, not in the sense that it's bad, but in the sense of its how it
It
self-replicates.
propagates.
Yeah,
Mark Citadel did actually an excellent write-up on the use of memes, but to
yeah, he did.
basically put it in a nutshell with my own spin, is that the memes are, the right finally responding to the left's very, I suppose, social nature, because what they do is they always, hunt in packs and they always dogpile on people and they don't make actual arguments. They just use their superior, numbers in like the urban elite space or whatever to, ostracize people they don't like, right?
Yeah,
And to me it seems like memes are a counteraction of that. It's like if I'm like in some big city studying at shit butt university or whatever and I call someone a racist, well, one, probably all my liberal friends will dogpile and say, yeah, that guy's an evil racist, and two, that person will probably just be like, oh no, I'm not a racist, I just think these things, right? It's a the power is clearly in the left's favor in that situation, right? It's a very emotional, and social response. There's no reason or facts there, right?
yeah, yeah. It's a social
But what you do
phenomenon.
with the meme is it like turns it almost puts the shoe on the other foot because it's like all these memes like it's the current year and stuff like that. They put the burden of proof like look at these retarded leftists.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It reverses things, which is, I think, an effective tool. I mean, the danger, I believe, it really was expressed by James in his article. I don't know if you read it. Um, and I was talking about this last night, actually, in the Plebeian podcast. Right, you have the alt-right, which has a core of white nationalists. However, the fact of the matter is that our present problem in the Occident is only political and economic secondarily. It is primarily a moral and spiritual crisis. And I do worry that lots and lots of people are kind of being confined and trapped to these sorts of surface level questions without ever even slightly considering ones of a deeper nature, like religion and these sorts of things, when indeed they should be. because that's really the only path for a true and full and complete restoration, instead of just scratching at the surface and twisting around a few symptoms. Um, and
I absolutely agree on the religious part, but I would say, do most people? Oh, let me rephrase that. I think from the perspective of some kind of person, whether they're a traditionalist, a new reactionary, or whatever, the best thing to do would be to sort of hitch your wagon to the broader alt-right, and then as it gains more power, try to, I guess, infiltrate it
yeah,
with
yeah,
your own
yeah. I mean,
brand.
that's what we're doing with West Coast Reactionaries to an extent.
Well,
People
I
take
wouldn't,
some.
I would edit that out, but yeah, I agree.
Well, but no, it's not. Infiltration is too deliberate a word. I believe, and I wrote this in my article the other day about a true elite and the alternative right, that yeah, you have a lot of people who might be just scratching the surface, but you have to have those who are more awake. They have to do, what they must do. They have to try and interact with certain people. They have to have some level of influence. They can't just, walk away because they don't want to get their hands dirty mingling with the filthy plebs. There has to be that relationship between the student and the teacher. You know what I mean? And of course,
Yeah, I think
it won't happen on a mass scale, but where it does happen, it's important and necessary.
once upon a time, I probably would have said that, if this was an army, the alt-right would be like the enlisted soldiers, and say something like NRX would be the officers.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You
And
have
as mu
sort of,
as much as the enlisted officers don't like the enlisted soldiers don't like the officers, they do need them. So uh, it's an
well,
interesting.
and it goes vice versa though. Like, I mean,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
don't want to, shit on NRX here, but I think a lot of, well, I think some of them have an obsession with pacifism to the point they think that's the only way. Like, I think if you're an intellectual movement like they are, then yeah, pacifism. On the other hand, someone needs to actually do stuff. Like, I can't name any point in history where, something was changed purely just because intellectuals got in a room and willed it into existence.
Ooh, no, I believe these things do require both. I believe the sort.
I'm not. That's what I'm saying. They require both. I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
I mean, activism is only efficacious if it is acting upon pre-existent trends and possibilities.
Well, it also needs a solid intellectual foundation to stand on as
Yeah,
well.
that's what I mean. And there needs to be a chance for it to succeed. The sort of activism like going out and just beating up non-whites is a total waste of time because all that would do is strengthen the liberal orthodoxy. However, the sort of quote activism unquote, which would be actually effectual, especially in today's world, is a counterculture, making right-wing quote unquote television and movies and music and articles and websites and podcasts, everything that we're involved with. This is
Yeah,
really how you do it.
just a little bit disclaimer for the general public. I'm not trying to shit on NRX. I'm just trying to drive home the point that different people need to specialize in what they're good at,
Oh,
basically.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure most NRXs understand that. As much as most of them are kind of moderns, kind of LARPing is more intelligent than they are. Uh, misusing words like Brahmin does get on my nerves because none of these people are spiritual. They aren't spiritually elite. They're, just because you have a high IQ and you're a little bit Semitic doesn't mean anything. But
I wouldn't. I would argue increasingly they're not even that high IQ. Maybe a few points above
oh, it
average.
depends it depends who you're talking about. Yarvin is clearly fucking intelligent. Most of
Oh
the
no, I
guys.
didn't mean the NRXers. I meant the Brahmin. The sort of what they describe as like the urban liberal case. Clearly, the
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
NRXers
yeah,
are
yeah,
very intelligent. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
perhaps almost too
People who work
intelligent.
for Google and fucking Microsoft are not Brahmin. You know, they're just kind of middle upper class nerds for the most part who happen to be socially liberal because they're sheltered. So,
I wouldn't even necessarily say that. I heard there's a lot of people, for instance, a corporation like Google who are secretly right wing or just politically passive. I think it's more a matter of the left is very, very good at poisoning the social well.
hmm, I don't know. I don't think when you say things like the left is good at poisoning, who exactly are you talking about there, and what is the process through which this unfolds? I think if you took like a sample of the people who worked for Google and you pushed them on their political beliefs, you would find the majority of them to be liberal. But the reasons for that would simply be because they follow the social zeitgeist and they follow the idea or even subconsciously, they've been born into this kind of nexus where the social consensus is the social consensus, and don't you dare dissent, or we'll call you a racist. I mean, this is how liberal ideology perpetuates. It
Mhm.
works like a kind of cult,
Yeah,
where
it does. I
you
can
don't
understand that.
need to know the kind of core of liberal philosophy to be a liberal. You
I
know,
don't think most of these people have ever heard of anything like the Frankfurt School
of
or
course not, of course not.
Marseille
But
or
the
anything like
nature of these ideas is that they have the hardcore there. They have the Frankfurt School. They have, Rousseau. You could go back and pick various things. But these ideologies also have a soft effect on the general culture. They have that kind of soft, passive element to them, which influences the ways in which people speak and informs the social zeitgeist. With right-wing ideas, I think you do need a more centralized authority through which to dispel certain ways of thinking and patterns of human behavior. So the church, for example, acting as a center of community. Of course, you do have a zeitgeist there, but I don't believe that a. I think the nature of what we would call right-wing ideology, as opposed to left-wing ideology, it acts in a far more natural way. So where leftism exists by attacking what is consistent and conservative and pre-existent, with the right, I believe you have to have those institutions there, which are publicly and openly saying this and this and this. With the left, all it does is react against what's before it. You know, all it does is harness that latent energy in people who wants to rebel and naysay and disagree, and people who don't quite understand something. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to write about at some point. But it's
Yeah, I would broadly agree, though. I'd say the mechanism by which the left it has more time existing, I suppose, naturally is a little bit different. I would say look at the increasing, excuse me, look at the increasing use of totalitarian measures to maintain a leftist status quo in Europe, the
yeah,
United States, et cetera, right?
yeah, yeah, and it is going to fail eventually.
Uh, One way or another, whether white people or not, so to speak, will survive the fall is perhaps another question, but it'll definitely end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I've sort of been working on like a little pet historical theory that, there's perhaps sort of three facets to change. And right now, for instance, if I lived in Europe, I wouldn't quite count on the right taking power yet necessarily.
Oh no, I don't believe it happened yet. I believe in some countries like Hungary, you'll see it soon.
Oh, I mean Western Europe. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think from what I can gather, what people in say Germany or Britain should hope for is like more moderate leftists who aren't as completely fanatical to take over. Like I heard in Germany, there might be this new guy Horst Seehofer who's a potential replacement for Merkel, who's a lot more restrained on his migration policy, right?
Mm, mm, yeah.
I mean, because you have to have all these other circumstances met. It's sort of like what happened in Cambodia in the 70s. The place is obviously a disaster under the Khmer Rouge, and then the Vietnamese invaded, and you could argue they didn't establish anything resembling a traditional society or a good society, but at least the Soviet brand of leftism was much less violent than the Chinese brand of leftism at that point of time, which was what was going on under the Khmer Rouge.
Mm. Are you still planning to write an article about this?
I don't know. I actually have to think about it. The problem is, I feel rather kind of honestly a little bit dumb compared to a lot of the people in these spheres, and I'd rather just sit back and learn and absorb information at this point.
Yeah, that's fair enough, man. But I do think it would be cool if you did. You know, I don't believe being wrong about something is a problem. It's only a problem if you refuse to admit you're wrong about something. If you say something incorrect in your article, like someone will call you out for it, and you can say, "Oh yeah, cheers for the correction." It's like not a big deal. But
Well, it's for instance, I would even recant or change my opinion on a lot of things I've written or done in the past. So there is definitely an evolution of views.
absolutely, yeah, same here, man. But I don't know. I want to see you just do some more writing because it's been a while, and I think it'd be nice.
I
Um,
might actually post a little bit of fiction, and I really need to get back to working on this.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's not the same fiction as before, though it's a similar post-apocalyptic theme.
Mm. Yeah, sure. You can do that, of course. We have a creative writing category where
Yeah,
everything.
So I might post that up just because if I do a fiction, I can craft the world however I want.
Yeah. It's a kind of theater there. You can place various actors and make, little experiments.
The right is increasingly becoming a money maker while the left has become a loss leader in terms of selling its culture, if that makes any sense.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I think that's burgeoning. Yeah, I think that's beginning to happen. Um, so
Like for instance, the new Ghostbusters flick, that's a financial disaster.
of
A
course
lot of
it
these
was,
other
but that was
a lot of
mostly
these
because it
other
was a shit
movies.
film.
Yeah, it
Zootopia did
was a shit.
fucking amazingly, and that was
Yeah.
a piece of liberal trash ideology. So,
Well,
it,
but the problem is I think it's almost better for them to go overboard in the culture and push these messages too blatantly and aggressively because well, one, because apparently, social justice doesn't sell. Two, I think the old style of propaganda where they tried to appeal to like mainstream, at least in America, like middle American, middle class sensibilities is actually more dangerous than just an aggressive open attack on society or
oh yeah,
like,
well, the left can only survive by being vampiric and feeding upon something before itself. Right now, they are in control, and the left-wing zeitgeist is in, its wings are spread, so it has nothing to rebel against. Which is why you see them kind of hysterically pin things to Trump or to the quote far right in Europe unquote, because they're looking for enemies, and they're increasingly failing to do that because most people aren't buying it because it's getting tired and things are getting dangerous and desperate in some places, especially in Europe nowadays. So, yeah, again, it's the sin of pride. It's the idea that they're arrogant and they've overstepped the boundary and they don't understand their own shortcomings and failings. This is really what it all boils down to a degree. So,
yeah, one way or another, they will be destroyed
of course they
by
will.
pride.
History is cyclical. We've known this for fucking. We knew this. Plato fucking knew this. Aristotle knew this. Leftist retards can't create a new man. They've tried many times and they've failed every single time. So,
Even if they somehow manage to annihilate all Western peoples, I think just the global South would get pissed off with their arrogance and destroy them.
of course it will. The right wing isn't just a European thing. The right wing or conservatism or tradition is it extends to all races and all groups for the most part. You know. So I,
Yeah,
I do think
it's
it is
it's worth.
I do think it is a mistake of many within the right to equate right wingness with whiteness. I think that's an error which is totally unnecessary.
It
Um, because a
yeah.
right wing Europe could easily ally itself politically with various groups in the Middle East and even North Africa and elsewhere. It isn't the
I
world against
guess
us,
I would agree, though, to a more limited extent than you. I can't speak for Europe, but at least in my case, in America, I know there's a lot of. Excuse me. Ugh. I need to go pour some coffee in a few minutes, but at least in America, in the Americas, a lot of Hispanics are actually very right wing on any issues that don't directly relate to race. Like, a lot of them are Catholics, observant Catholics, and they believe in traditional gender roles, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Of course
And
it
I'm
will.
not talking so much about your average like illegal immigrant. I'm not trying to push the like, oh, the natural conservatives meme, but I think some of the smarter Hispanics, do grasp right wing ideology.
Mhm.
And I mean Hispanic in the American sense, like mestizo, not, the white ones.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Well, that's their if it's their
I'm not
organization.
I'm not gonna like drive home the point because it's not my movement. I don't care, but I'm just saying if you press me on the issue, I'd say yeah. There's I think a lot of leadership decisions I don't like that Hestia society and the anorexers in general have made.
Well, look at it this way. Anorex is mostly upper middle class. There are people involved with it neo-reaction under pseudonyms who are actually high-ranking American politicians. To them,
Really?
yes. To those guys in those sorts of closed communities in their kind of inner circles, whining about other people with power is left wing. What you should do is get power yourself. And I agree to a degree, to an extent. This is why I don't see it as really worthwhile whining about, oh, they did this wrong, the left did this wrong. We know what they did wrong, but the answer is to do it better yourself and to get into their position, stamp them out, and be better and be superior. Because what else is going to happen? It's a profoundly left-wing and modern and revolutionary kind of idea and attitude to just complain about people before you instead of saying he did that wrong, I'm going to do it better.
Well, it also depends, I think, on the mechanism by which you do these things. Like, I think a lot of NRXers would argue the sort of formula that, oh, become worthy, accept power.
Yeah.
Become worthy and accept power, which I would say it's not quite as simple as that because that's not possible as pastors. I agree you should become worthy, but in order to get to the power, you also need to do things, that prove you're worthy.
Well, for example, some governor in a state in America does something stupid. Instead of complaining about it, enter politics yourself and take their position and fix the mistake. That's what they would say. Obviously, that's not easy. Of course, it's not easy though.
I
But
don't think that's what the NRXers would say because they argue against electoral politics. Though maybe they've changed for all I know. I'm going off very bold.
well, of course, they disagree with engaging in it from a democratic perspective. But if you're at the top in that system, then you know it isn't actually a democracy. You're there vying for political power and control. That's how. I mean, at least is what my instinct would tell me. But yeah. But almost 2 years since our very first conversation.
Yeah, that's why I came back to the Plebeian podcast since I sort of want to honor the anniversary, if you will.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. It's awesome.
I'll only be able to stay for like maybe half an hour or
It's
an
fine,
hour.
dude. It's on. Well, our anniversary, I think, was on the 14th of October. Let me just go to the 14th of October. That's on a Friday. Yeah. How good fucking timing is that? 14th of October, that evening, and I'll let you know, of course. But see if you can set some time aside for it, even if it's just a few minutes. But it'd be cool. It'd be cool to do that. 2 years. I've recently archived everything on my website, and there's a shit ton of
it. To think like where we would have been if like my arms hadn't hurt that day, and I had to like just type stuff out. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm not saying I contributed anything great. It's just one of those sort of coincidences.
I know. Dude, don't worry about it. You are the reason why we have West Coast Reactionaries and why I'm still doing the Plebeian podcast and all the rest of it. That's fine. It's cool to admit that. You might have jumped in and out, but that happened in history. It occurred, and there's proof of it. And I've archived all of our stuff, all of my stuff as well, over the past 2 years on my website. And let me just actually pull it up on my MP3s in my files right now. So if I go to my desktop,
remember when we used to do hangouts that were like 8 hours long?
Yeah. So if I go to the first series of the Plebeian podcast, the first I've turned it all to MP3s. I mean, the first. Oh dear, I just closed the bloody tab by pressing something I shouldn't have done. Anyway, get back to it. Plebeian podcast series 1. It is like how much data is here? 2 gigabytes of audio, and that's just MP3s. If I go back to all of the Plebeian podcasts so far, that's 3.2 gigs. Wow. So 2 gigs of that 3.2 were in the first series alone, which began with you and me meeting each other. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well, I think it also makes sense to an extent because we were exploring, all the parts of ideology, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I would say.
Go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just this year in our kind of impromptu hangouts, we've done nearly 3 gigs of data. That's just MP3s, not the videos. And that's 21 items, 21 episodes of the hangout. There have been 24 episodes of the Plebeian podcast, or 25 now, actually.